episode of the Microshift Project Podcast. I am your host, Nick Valinchak. That's Nicky V. If you're nasty, and I know what you're thinking, here I am yet again, all by myself. But I have a couple pieces of news. First, there's something I just really wanted to talk about today. There's like that one little piece of solo content that I really felt pressed to get out before we start to bring on guests. I promised it, and we're going to start off with an awesome guest. I met her in Boston when we did our speech at MIT in July. Her name is Dr. Jan Reeder. She has a great message around the acronym MORE. She will be joining us next week. But today, what I really wanted to talk about was the idea of being a parent after having gone through addiction. You know, so my backstory, obviously, for everyone at this point probably knows, I grew up in a house that was marked by loss and abuse. I spent years drowning myself in addiction, and now I'm raising a son, and he's young. But as you are a parent, come to find out things move really, really fast. And so I don't know how the amount of years that have gone by have already gone by as fast as they have. I find myself to be a deeply philosophical person. I oftentimes lay in bed with my mind racing and just putting forth some kind of thought and exercising the muscles around working my way through how I stand on a specific issue or how something impacts me or how I would, spread a message to my tribe, things like that. They just constantly sit and go through my head. And over the last several years, really, I have just kind of sat here and thought to myself about how difficult it is to be a parent in 2025. And I think that I don't want to look back and say at any point in time things were ever easy, right? I think every generation goes through struggles that are unique to them in the time that they're going through them because it's things that they haven't experienced, or it's some kind of change in the culture that we are living in that the previous generations took for granted or at least didn't have to worry about. I think one of the biggest separators between my parents' generation and my generation is that you had way more single income families back in the 1990s. And so it's very common for dad to go to work, mom to stay home and raise the kids. As is usual for me, I somehow end up being ahead of that curve as well, because while my mom didn't have to go to work, she just didn't exist as a human being anymore. And so we did have a single parent household, and I got to see firsthand just how difficult that can be. And it's not a really good example to use because my dad had dealt with his brother getting shot in the back of the head, breaking up a domestic dispute in Youngstown in the early 80s. 10 years later, he loses my mom within a month of time finding out that she has extremely aggressive cancer. He's left to raise kids that I won't say he didn't want, but it is an absolute truth to say that my mom is the one that wanted the kids. And he had to try to be a parent while working a demanding job, mostly emotionally, psychologically demanding, as opposed to necessarily physically demanding. He was in the elevator industry. He was, I think, the only person in the country that had both a union card to the management side and the labor side. So he found himself in high demand for a lot of things. In the Northeast area, Midwest, you could go to talk to elevator people and say Mike Valinchak, and people would actually know who he is. I still to this day will run into people, and if they're like 35 plus and I mention my dad's name, they'll be like, oh yeah, I your dad did a training, or I met him in the union hall or something like that. But the type of parenting I grew up with, I knew pretty immediately that when my time came, I was going to do things a lot differently. And that's fine. I think that's good. I think that my father, and we've a great relationship to this day and have been able to resolve, because listen, I was an asshole. He may have been abusive and there may have been things that he could have done differently, and he'll be the first person to admit that now. But at a point, I also shifted, and what I was giving him didn't make things at a very hard point in his life any easier. So you can't walk away from the situation and be like, well, he hit you, he put his hands on you when you were a kid, so that, he is way more wrong. I think that in life, everybody has to be able to raise their hand and not assign weights to who was more wrong and who was more right. It's just a matter of, we both did things that we wish we would have done differently. But I saw how he parented, and I always knew I wanted to be more of a hands-on parent. I didn't want to have to get physical with my child. I wanted there to be, I knew that there had to be other ways to handle how you bring a child up in this world, because ultimately I think that what people learn is what they'll carry forth with them, and that will be their first line of defense before they have to get put in a position where they need to learn from what is wrong. So if my son is a toolbox, I want to equip him with the best tools as possible, so as he ages, he needs to make less changes to what's in his toolbox. If I can give him that, then I will feel like I have succeeded as a parent. But the addiction component to it has really weighed on me over the last few months, especially as my son has been transitioning from the era of his life where he was a mommy's boy to now everything is dad. Who do you want to go back to see the doctor with you? Dad. Who are you going to sit next to at dinner? Dad. Who do you want to go spend your time with this weekend if one of us is going to leave the house? Dad. So I know that his eyes are on me, but my eyes are also on him, and I see so much of myself in him. And for some things, I think that's going to be great. Listen, I could take the rest of this podcast to put over how great of a guy I am. Okay, that's kind of a joke. It's funnier when other people are here to hear these things and be able to comment on them. But I think that I have some characteristics that are extremely positive. I'm loving to a fault. I want to see the best out of people. I want people to achieve their fullest out of life. I want to believe that there is innate goodness in people, even if you have to dig through thick outer shells to get there. I believe that we all have something that is such a radiating positive that we can give to humanity if we just take time to be willing to find it in one another. But then I think to myself, and I think, man, if he can have so many of those same types of characteristics, then it's inevitable that he also inside him has that streak that I had in me. That fuck you, I won't do what you tell me, rage against the machine type streak that just causes chaos and catastrophe in everything around him. And it frightens me. And I see where I was, and he's not near the teenage years yet, but I think about my life where things started to shift. And it does really start as you get into your teenage years, because you start to try to figure out who you were. And I remember I was starting to figure out who I was. I had a small group of friends, but we were very close, and we were very much into the new metal movement of the late 90s and early 2000s. We were the kids who had the Deftones, Seven Dust, Korn t-shirts, and were walking around in black t-shirts and the baggiest Jinko jeans, bowl haircuts. That was what we were super into. And unfortunately at this time, there was one of, many traumatic events that now seem to happen on a weekly basis across the country, Columbine. And for my generation, I really think that was like the first, I know for me, and all I can do is talk about myself. I really shouldn't say for my generation, but for myself, it was the first time that I really thought like, oh, there's something more that could happen than getting in a fight at school. Like, now do I have to be worried about going to school and somebody bringing in a firearm and not really caring about who catches the other end of it? And so it nerved me, but it also put me in one of my first very frustrating positions as a teenager. And I remember this to this day. I think it was myself, Kevin, Jeremy. We're sitting at a round table. Canfield had like a 2-layered cafeteria. So you went down 2 or 3 stairs to a big room, but then it had like, I don't know, 10 or 12 tables on the upper area at the high school. We kind of sat up in the back, and we were sitting there minding our own business. For anybody who knew us, we were like, there was nothing aside from the music we liked, there was nothing we did that should have been like eyebrow raising suspicion, you know? And I'll never forget at lunchtime when the assistant principal, who went on to become the principal of Canfield High School, came up to our table and had the unmitigated audacity to look at us and say something to the extent of, "We don't have to worry about you guys becoming the next Columbine kids, do we?" And I think the 3 of us at the table just kind of looked at each other in a, we were now older than we should have had to be. Because at this time, we're freshmen, maybe sophomores, so 15, maybe 16, maybe 14. And we have to critically think through the fact that somebody in power within the school system had effectively told us that he is looking at us like we might be mass murderers. What do you think that does to the psyche of a person who is, number one, trying to figure out who they are, trying to learn about who they are, and maybe also kind of struggling on figuring out how to fit in? Because this is still now like 2 or 3 years me coming to Canfield. I still don't feel comfortable in my own clothes and my own body being in this environment, and now I'm getting kind of told like, "Oh, well, you know, we think you fit the characteristics because you have a black t-shirt on of someone who might do unspeakable harm to people in this school." It was very, very frustrating, and it probably set me back in a lot of different ways. But it highlights the new frustration that I think parents of this generation have to deal with, because there were at least a few years before the next major shooting event happened in the United States at a school. But now we sit in a situation where this type of thing happens pretty much weekly. A lot of it doesn't even get publicized like it used to. The shock value has completely worn off. And let's face it and be honest, as the country as a whole, we have effectively decided we're not going to do anything about it because we're afraid of how it might affect a combination of rights that we have. And in fairness, there is some justification to having that fear given the current situation in this country. But it can't be at the detriment of our youth. And then you hear reports of cyberbullying, again, something that we didn't have to really worry about in 2000, because even though the internet was there and we had AIM and things like that, we hadn't fully figured out how to use those types of things in the fullest of the hateful ways that we could. So there wasn't really as much cyberbullying going on at that point. Now there is. Now it's a concern. Now we didn't have to worry. The isolated incidents of kids being abducted or the reporting of sexual predators or any kind of sex crimes towards kids, it wasn't a thing. And now the people that kids are supposed to be able to trust, family members, people in clergy, people in school systems, are committing these acts that it makes it feel hard to trust to allow your child to go somewhere. So not only do I have all of these things on my mind, but then I see this sponge and I see how it's little Nicky, through all of the things he does, how he has interest. It might not be the same things that I liked, but how he loves the things he loves, how he loves people, how he how he is a good friend, how he is willing to say, I'm not going to sit with the large group of friends because this friend over here didn't have anyone to sit with. He doesn't necessarily always get along as well with all these kids over here, but I'm going to go sit with him because I don't want him to feel alone. And that's something I would have done at his age. And so it scares me because I know that there was that point where things shot off in a different direction. And even though I still may have had a lot of those traits, they were masked by the addiction that had taken over. And it scares me as a parent because I need to be open with my child. I need to be able to tell him, maybe not all the grisly details, but I need to be able to tell him what I went through in life. But I still have that fear that if I say too much, or I don't frame it the right way, or he sees that you did all that and you're still able to have the life you have, is there really a consequence to your actions if you're able to go from a drug addict to being a successful business person, having a nice house, being able to move and do the things when you want to do them and not necessarily be on someone else's clock? I worry about these things. These are all those things that make it really difficult in understanding how to proceed with my actions being a parent. But I will tell you this, even as I'm saying it right now, I think to myself, is this that much different than the situation I was put in with Larry Sweeney, where I had an opportunity to use what I went through to talk about my unique experiences in life and find those common grounds where I had struggled and he was struggling, and to be able to let him know, listen, non-committally, you can come to me and I can be a sounding board. I'm here for you. I will show you my wounds and my scars because they've helped me get to the point of accepting where I'm at, and you can do it too. You can, if we all just started showing ourselves in each other, our scars, this world could be a better place because we could have vulnerability. We could have empathy. Everybody would be willing to see everybody for what they were, because at the end of the day, the names, the faces, the titles of the problems might all be different, but we all go through shit. Right? It's unavoidable. There are no people who manage to walk through life going through nothing. And if you haven't yet, my God, it's coming. This world is undefeated in terms of trying to punch people into the ground. So for me, it is dually trying to break those cycles. I broke one cycle in the fact that I have not been physical with my son. I refuse it. I have broken something that, while it made me physically and maybe mentally stronger, it damaged me so much psychologically that it had to have contributed down the line to some of the decisions I was willing to make because I wasn't mentally strong. I was mentally and emotionally fragile. When you're looking at the one person who has the ability to nourish, to lead, to give you all the things that you need as a child, and they respond back with violence, even young, you still wonder, what did I do? It is never, the thought process is never, man, what is going on with him that he's doing that? Sure, my grandma probably thought that, my grandpa, maybe aunts and uncles, if they were aware of the situations, they might have, but as a kid, you look at yourself and think, what am I doing that's causing that behavior from my parent? So I've broken that cycle, and I am famously, and I think a lot of us are famously great at being able to do what I say, but not what I do. I'm great at being able to tell someone, here's exactly how to solve your problem. And that solution could be extremely applicable to me in the situation I'm in, but I will stick my hand out and say, no, I can't do that. Here's my list of excuses and I can't. And I recorded a whole podcast episode about how I had wished I had taken a different approach in my relationship with Larry Sweeney. I cannot, in good faith, make that same mistake again with my son. So the breaking of the cycles isn't just about addiction. It's about refusing to continue to pass down pain, whether that's anger, neglect, or self-doubt. I do not want to contribute to any of the negative habits my son picks up. I want to be able to be support. I want to be able to be a guiding light in a world of darkness for him. So that's what I have to press myself to do. I have to press myself today to say, I can't be fearful about what the result might be. I have to be able to be honest, I have to stand upright, and I have to approach the situations with integrity, knowing that even if there is a small veering off the path, that by doing that for him, it will ensure that he gets on and stays on that path as quickly as possible. Your past doesn't just disappear. I think that is one of the things that's hardest to understand. And as we kind of close out, I'll do a little bit of an explanation of what I mean. When I was at the rescue mission, I went from a point where at 16, 15, let's call it 14, 15 years old in Canfield High School, I didn't really have a lot of friends. The friends I had, I was really close with. I got along with most people, but I didn't have a huge group of friends. By the time I was 18 years old, I was getting along with pretty much damn near everybody, but the amount of friends I had at my cell phone, I remember had hundreds of contacts in it when I was 18 years old. And yes, you're messing around with drugs, you're going to end up having more people that you're talking to. But I had got to a point where I always had someone, something, or somewhere to be, someone to hang out with. There was never a situation where I was going to have to worry about what am I going to do tonight. I could go somewhere, I could do something. And when I got to the mission, it had gotten to the point where if my cell phone had been working, some people would have answered the phone, but they would have answered the phone just because they knew I was at the lowest place possible. And that's not an insult to them. That's not a judgment against their character. It's a judgment on the actions that I took that would cause somebody to want to feel that way, that would cause someone to want to revel in my failure. And so what became the hardest thing as I was starting to get my life back in order was the understanding that there was no going back. There was no ability to knock back on those same doors and say, hey, here I am, it's all better. Because I wasn't doing the same things that I was doing anymore. And not just that, but I had done a lot of bad things to a lot of people that I was friends with, and they were not at a point in their lives where they were really interested in needing to forgive because they were too busy doing other things. And they, quite frankly and honestly, looked at my body of work and said, I did so much to so many people that I was absolutely deserving of what was coming my way. And is that true? I would say there's a little bit of truth. There's a lot of bit of truth in it, right? I deserve the effects of my causes. I think that is a pretty fair way of looking at it. I deserved all of that. But from the base humanistic position, if I believe people are capable of good, even throughout all the bad, I would still want to believe that someone could look at me and say, I know they fucked me over, but I'm going to give them another chance. And listen, it took time, and it has happened. It has not happened at 100% rate, and that's okay. That's something that I've had to learn to live with, and that all I can do is extend my hand and say, I'm sorry. After that is out of my control. It's on everyone else to deal with things how they need to deal with things in the position that they're in, and I fully support everyone to have to do it. I can honestly tell you I forget where those 2 points came together, but I do know that understanding the consequences of your actions can sometimes be difficult, and we're not always prepared for them. And I would like to, as someone who is very data oriented in everything he does, from my businesses to my hobbies, I'd like to think that I need to make the decisions that the data shows me are more likely to yield the best results personally and professionally. And so that's why I have to be transparent like I am. That's why I have to say the things that are on my mind. And my mind isn't feelings first, right? My mind is based off of facts. My mind isn't based off of what's best for me. My mind sits in an existence and tries to rationalize based off of what is better for the greater good. And sometimes you have to take that energy and you have to reduce it down to the specific small situations you're dealing with. And a lot of what we talked about today was having kids in this day and age, and especially having kids knowing that all of this stuff is going on around me. And 5 and 10 years from now, as he is entering into high school and beyond, I can only imagine things, hard to say if they'll get worse, but they'll at least be different, and it'll be a new set of challenges that as a parent, I have to prepare myself to be able to help my child walk through. And so I'm going to do that to the best of my ability, being forefront, upright, and doing what I think is best for the community at the largest scale, and bring it down to how does that impact my son. And for me, it's being transparent and open and honest. It's about talking when the time comes to his parents of his friends, letting them know what I had been through, being willing to be vulnerable to them, and asking to be able to be vulnerable to their kids with this message. Because I don't want my son to have to go through what I did. I don't want him to have to risk not making it out the other side, even if he makes it out the other side stronger. It's an unnecessary battle to send your kid through. Anyway, that's it. I just really felt it on my heart to talk about having a kid as an addict, having a kid in 2025. But the real fun and excitement is going to start when we bring in guests next week. I have a few lined up already. I'm super excited about it. I think we're going to be able to work the spectrum from people who are out there making big changes in the world in a very visible way, but also people that are going out there and making big changes in the world and might not be seen because they don't have the platform or desire to be seen. As always, if you found this useful today, please, I would appreciate it more than anything if you can subscribe to this on YouTube or whatever podcast network you're listening to. If you can share this with someone who you feel like might gain from it, that would also be great. If you can follow me on social media, I'm on Twitter, Instagram, at Nick from CWE. You can find me on YouTube at the Microshift. And until next time, we'll see you again.